This is the Iron Sharpens Iron movement, sharing insights into the power of people-centric leading.
Hi, this is Jim, and today we welcome to our tribe a best-selling author of 4 books, a renowned speaker. He has presented at over 4 different TED events and also writes for Forbes and the Harvard Business Review. He has garnered more than 20 industry awards over his career. Previously as the Chief Envisioner and Chief Learning Officer at TELUS, a Canadian telecommunications office with revenues of over $14 billion, he's helped increase the company's employee engagement to record levels of nearly 90%. This is the one and only Dan Pontefract. The Iron Sharpens Iron movement is brought to you by N2 Growth, a leader in executive search, leadership development, and talent management. We find and develop the world's best leaders. Learn more about our practice by visiting us at n2growth.com or click on the link in the show notes of this podcast. Dan, welcome to the Iron Sharpens Iron movement. We are really thrilled to have someone with your level of depth and knowledge and passion to attend this podcast. You know, our audience is always thirsty for trying to make themselves better. And just like the name, implies, iron sharpens iron, we're always looking for those people that just make us better every single day. You're that guy this week, and we're really glad to have you on the show.
Well, Jim, that sounds very kind, but also un-Canadian. We're pretty flat up here. Everyone's the same.
Well, I recognize how much of a thought leader you are, and especially in kind of the realm of employee engagement and human-centric leading, and that's right in our sweet spot. So I personally have been looking forward to this week's podcast and ready to just dive in. You know that one of the things that I was reading, you just came out with a new book, Lead.care.win, and we're going to talk about that. But in the write-ups in there, as I was looking at that book, one line struck me, and it says, every human interaction is crucial. I'd love for you to open up and talk to us about what that means to you.
What a doozy, and love to. Well, I mean, first of all, where I see the discontent from an employee perspective, first of all, is that far too often, their direct boss or their boss's boss or the general leaders, the senior C-suite, the ELT, the SLT, as sometimes they're called, senior leadership teams, right? I mean, they kind of act as if they're not human. And then the relations that they create are therefore not human either, or perhaps the better term is they're inhumane. And I just, how hard is it to come to work, whether that's virtual or physically face-to-face, and still be human in the way in which you're interacting and treating people? So, for example, why can't a boss come in on the Monday and say to, let's say, one of the team members, "Hey, you got your haircut this weekend. It looks great." Like, what's wrong with that? Because we do that to our kids or our friends in the neighborhood.
Do you think is it just driven off of either this hierarchical, psychological kind of positioning that the higher up you go, the more impersonal, you become? Or do you think it's kind of driven in the last 20, 30 years in industry that just people are chasing numbers and they're not really chasing people?
Well, there is a cornucopia of issues I think we can delve into. And we've only got, 8 hours for this podcast recording?
Sure. If you want to go for it, that's good with me.
Well, that is definitely one. The clamoring of title, if you will, and the hierarchical quest for, your role and the career. But there are other factors. I mean, one of them is the quench and fixation on power. So there seems to be an entitlement, a sense of entitlement when you become a leader of people, whether you're a manager, director, senior director, VP, et cetera, up the chain. It's like, oh, I'm more powerful now. So therefore, I can be less human. Fantastic. But another one is greed.
Oh.
So greed creates this weird psyche that occurs and happens to human beings, particularly in these leadership roles, the senior leadership roles, the power, and that is the greed and quest for more salary, more bonus, whether it's profit, whether it's revenue. It just sort of, there's a fixation that seems to occur, And then what happens is that the team and the leader's kind of quest to position the team centers around, the ultimate goal of I want to make more money. And that really gets in the way. And then the last one, I would say, just to start us off here today, Jim, is you've touched on it, but I'll be kind of more specific. It's when we are greedy and we're power hungry and we're climbing the ladder and we're not caring about human beings, but we ultimately have packed so much into our calendars. When we're overly busy and we're overly burdened by tasks, by actions, etc., we don't have time to be human. So we kind of get stressed. We lose face, if you will, and so we don't have that time to be a human being. And so that also factors in highly to that lack of kind of human leadership.
It's so funny, Dan. I will tell you in that last, I always prided myself on being, a human centric leader, a servant leader, a person among the people, and all those kind of things. And as I became more successful, in my last assignment, it was in Washington, D.C. I was in charge of a very large organization. I was very busy, and I prided myself in look how packed my calendar was, because I took it as this point of pride. And it took me a few years to realize how toxic of a mindset that was, even internally to myself, that I allowed no white space on my calendar, no thinking time, anything like that. And I took it as a point of pride when really I look back on it now and just go, how sad was that moment in time about being prideful of packing the calendar? Sad.
Well, I mean, the good news is that you have a wonderful ability to self-reflect and say, that maybe not
Yeah.
is the best way in which to lead myself or to lead others. And sadly, there aren't enough gyms in the world that are actually looking in the mirror and asking themselves, is this the best way to lead myself, let alone others and projects? And so there's this, it's weird, Jim, like this. And again, I'm privileged to work with lots of leaders, lots of organizations. I mean, I'm not making this stuff up, so I see it firsthand.
Sure.
But the badge of honor that seems to be associated with leaders and their calendars is just, it's just, I don't understand it. So let's play this out, right? Oh, Jim, I'm so busy. I can't believe this. Oh, so what is there anything you can do? I can help you. No, no, I just, what, there's so much. I'm back to back to back to back to back today and tomorrow and the next day and every day for the next 7 months. I wish I could have lunch with you. I just can't. I'm sorry. But you know what? I'm doing great. I haven't seen my kids in 6 months, but whatever. It's all good. Right, Jim?
Yeah. Right. And now I'm disengaged. That's
Right.
exactly. Yeah. And it's a common tale, though, Dan. This is the whole thing. This is why I'm glad that we're having this conversation because a lot of the audience are folks that either I've coached or coached in the past or are looking for some coaching tips, just trying to make themselves better, using these conversations as a professional development opportunity. And I just hope we're kind of preaching this from the highest mountain that we can because you just see these mistakes over and over and over again. If I was to tell you the word busy, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? I mean, what do you feel that word means to you in the context of this discussion?
Squirrel.
Wow.
That's what busy means, squirrel. And the reason for that is it's cheeky, but the sense of busyness that has enveloped organizations really takes me back to the Pixar movie called Up, when um, when the dogs were able to speak because they had a kind of a voice contraption on their or
Yep.
pharynx or their larynx, and and they got distracted every time they saw a squirrel, and you could hear the dog say squirrel. Now, what my cheeky point there is, we get so distracted by our busyness that we're just saying squirrel all day as human beings. So whether that's the back to back to back meetings, no time to actually reflect. We don't have, you rightly pointed out, Jim, the kind of space, the white space in our calendar to protect making better decisions, to be planning, to actually having like 10-minute coaching conversations with the team, like building that time in to actually listen to folks. It's a whole bunch of squirrel. That's what busy means to me.
Yeah, it's a lazy word. That is for sure. There's no doubt. It's toxic. It's lazy, and it's so overused. It's amazing. It is absolutely so. Dan, let me ask you this before we kind of start diving into some of these things that we see in general. And you already brought up one of my favorite things when we talk about looking in the mirror. Um, but before we get into those, let me ask you this question. For senior leaders and your experience with being around senior leaders and one yourself, what is the ratio? 80-20, 90-10? What's the ratio of needing to be a subject matter expert compared to being a human centric leader? What's the right ratio for senior executive leaders?
99-1.
Love it. And you don't mean 99 subject matter expert.
It doesn't really matter when you're in a senior leadership role what the widget is. What matters is whether or not you can galvanize, motivate, empathically support the team, the ideas, etc. I mean, if you're in the room as the senior leader and you're the smartest person in the room with the intellect on that particular subject matter, you're in
You're
the
in the
wrong
wrong
room,
room.
Jim.
That's right.
Like
That's exactly
seriously.
right, Dan. Yeah, it's so true. And it's interesting where you see the organizations that get it right, that go after these type of true leaders, compared to the organizations that are just trying to find the ultimate fixer, and it's trying to fix the widget with a widget fixer, and it never works out. It never works out that
Hmm.
way.
Indeed.
So, what led you to, you've written many books in the past. All of them are amazingly motivating in themselves, obviously, right? They're great things to take away and all that stuff. What started you, a year ago, 2 years ago, to say, I'm ready for my next book. I'm ready to to start writing down some things that I haven't covered before that I think's pertinent to today's world.
Well, to be clear, Jim, writing books keeps me married because I'm out of Denise's hair. So that's self-preservation.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
No, that's the Canadian cheekiness in me. Well, okay. So I look at least where I'm at right now in my literary career, having 25 years of working in organizations like full time as chief learning officer, chief envisioner, whatever, but also working with many other organizations as a Sherpa, a guide on the side, if you will. Um, I use a three-legged stool metaphor to describe the four books that kind of got me to this book. So let me just take it back a second so you can see and why I wrote the book Lead, Care, Win. So on leg number one, here I am as a chief learning officer inside of a telecom that has 48% level employee engagement. And I was kind of brought in to help, create a more open, collaborative, nurturing type of culture. Certainly wasn't just me, lots of people involved, but I came in at a time in which, it needed I guess, a rethink on how leadership and organizational operations occurred.
Hmm.
And so over a 5-year period, that culture shifted from that 48% engagement level to 87, and there were 50,000 employees. So I kind of certainly knew what worked and what didn't. And it's just, any organizational culture is a work in progress. But it
Yep.
led me to write a book called Flat Army, which is a organizational culture change book, essentially. So I looked at that. I said, okay, well, there's the culture bit, and I could provide some hands-on experience because I went through it. But then it was sort of looking out and saying, well, it's not just culture, is it, Dan? What are other organizations that are getting it also doing? Not just culture, not just culture, was it? And so I stumbled upon the work of Paul Pullman, who was the CEO of Unilever. And I reached out to him and I said, so what do you call this thing that you've got going on out here? And he said, oh, it's our purpose, Dad. Purpose is huge when it comes to Unilever. So he said, oh, right. So culture is how you operate and organize internally. Purpose is what you stand for and how you galvanize an organization towards a higher meaning in what you do for society. So the second book, The Purpose Effect, became the yin to the yang. So it's the culture and purpose. So now you have two legs of the stool. But then, kind of what we started chatting about, Jim, just like 5 minutes ago, I realized that far too many leaders and organizations weren't inculcating said open culture or purpose because they are too busy or too distracted or they're just maniacal with their calendars. And so I wrote a book called Open to Think. And the subtitle says it all. Slow down, think creatively, and make better decisions. And so it's 80,000 words of examples, essentially, of people and organizations that have won back their time, that dream, decide, and do, and then they repeat. So,
Wow.
okay, so now we've got three legs of a stool, and now I'm up to the point of your question, basically. So, so, so people were asking me, well, Dan, you're very tactical on what the culture change is, how to do purpose of self, purpose of role, etc. And also, now you're helping us think creatively, how to make decisions, critical thinking, what have you. So, how does this all summarize, Dan? How do you put this all together? And so a good friend of mine sort of challenged me and said, Dan, you're a pretty good leader. You know how to lead people. You've led teams of 150 people, of 50 people, of 80 people. Like you're a great leader. And again, it's very un-Canadian, very pretentious of me to say, but this friend of mine challenged me and said, why don't you write a book that helps leaders see the world that you see it as you lead teams? That way, maybe you can connect the dots of your other three theories of culture, of purpose, of thinking. And I thought, oh, okay. So I purposely, and this is going to sound weird, the first three books, Jim, I interviewed in total about 600 people, like
wow.
leaders and others across the planet. For lead.care.win, I interviewed one.
Huh.
And so the lead.care.win, I guess, field guide is distilled from 25 years of leading people and observing what works. And the reason I only interviewed one person was because I wanted it to be both a reflection of how I see the world as a more caring type of leadership that's required, but also the only interview that came about was because another friend had introduced me to the founder and CEO of Zoom. And this was before the pandemic. And so I had a conversation with Eric Wan, who's the founder, because I had heard that he was this individual who left Cisco because he was frustrated about the culture and the leadership and the purpose, and that the freneticism of the organization was driving him mad. So kind of the first three books.
Right.
And I get to meet this guy on Zoom for a couple of interviews. And when he said to me, he said, look, Dan, the only thing we do around here essentially is that we want to deliver happiness. And we actually only operate with one value. And the company value that we have is just one word, Dan. And that one word is care. And I thought, okay, if I'm going to read, I'd already come up with the title, lead.care.win. This is the CEO of Zoom who left an organization because of bad culture and started Zoom 10 years ago. And this is before the pandemic. And then I went back to him during the pandemic and said, hey, Eric, how you doing? He's like, we are delivering happiness and I'm making mistakes and I'm loving it. And we're still caring. Dan, thanks for checking in. I was like, oh, if I could just you can't have any better interviews. So I stopped. I was like, nope, Eric is it. And so long-winded way of saying, three-legged stool, culture, purpose, thinking, the seat is lead.care.win. How can you create the bedrock, if you will, towards a more caring type of leadership?
Wow. So I got to ask you this, Dan. Is there a reason why it was just three very specific words? Okay.
I love it. No, it's because I sound sinister with my laugh there. I'm not Dr. Evil in the Austin Powers movies, but I don't have my pinky finger in my mouth here. No, I love challenging the reader to think about the title in the books.
Nice.
So, flat army, what does that mean? I mean, you've got the word army in there. I thought you were an open, collaborative guy. and I challenge the reader in that case to say, look, army is from the Latin armada. Armada means flotilla. Flotilla is a group of vessels sailing together, each with their own captain. And so, you can have a flat flotilla. I mean, it's the water, right? You're going to go from point A to point B. You have to work together, otherwise you're crashing into one another. There's torrential weather to overcome. You've got to work together on that as well. Anyway, that's what Flat Army was. Back to lead, care, win. People challenge me. Oh, you've got the word win in there. I thought, Dan, you're not supposed to win with leadership. But it's actually, it's a bit of a double entendre. If you choose to win, you must care with your leadership.
Beautiful.
If you lead by caring, you will win over the hearts and minds of your people.
That's genius, Dan. That's a genius one. I love it. I love it. Do you believe in the power of threes? Have you heard of the power of threes? Yeah.
Dan Pink taught me that a couple of years ago. I mean, he read one of the books and said, this is too complicated. Maybe you could just write in threes, Dan.
Okay.
So it stuck with me as well, that conversation, and lead, care, win, hence the 3 words. Yeah.
Nah, I love it. So Dan, when you were in the big organizations and you were starting to turn some of these things around, and you were able to change culture and all that stuff. And with lead, care, win, really it's you, right? It's you looking in the mirror and writing your words down and saying, these are my experiences. This last 25, 30 years of what I've seen, I know works and all those kind of things. From a leader's perspective, you can have these individual thoughts, you can have these individual beliefs and all of that. How do you implement this? And this might go back to Flat Army and you address it in there, but how do you implement it from an organizational point of view? It's real easy for you to maybe change yourself or be a good person and know these are your attributes, but how do you say, I'm going to organizationally change something with these kind of new dynamics that aren't the norm yet out in business world?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and maybe that I hadn't thought of this, but that's where lead, care, win can actually marry Flat Army. So let me try to answer that. In lead, care, win, there are 9 leadership behaviors, and the behaviors range from things like how you embrace change, how you command clarity, how you stay present, etc. And really, why I kind of focused on 9 was distill down what I've seen and witnessed, and also perhaps enacted as an individual self leader, as behaviors that allow the team and the organization to, quote, win. And if I go back to Flat Army now, this is where the marriage proposal comes in. When in Flat Army, I make a point of saying, if your organization does not have a leadership philosophy, one in which that outlines not just values that ultimately, are appended to a wall and people look at as they come into the building and don't really do anything about it, but that the values are backed by behaviors. Those behaviors are woven into your career development pathing, your performance management practices, your hiring and firing methodologies, your learning and professional development tactics. If you take the values and thus what sometimes people call values attributes, or the behaviors, if you take those and weave them into the organization right across from frontline team members up to the C-suite, so that everyone knows what's expected of them at their level, which may require you to have a little bit of leveling going on. So frontline team member, call that level 1, management level 2, directors level 3, let's say, VPs and above level 4. There'll be kind of more expectation, if you will, of a level 4 than a level 1, but you have the same behaviors, Jim.
Yeah.
So if we take an example in lead, care, win, dare to share. Dare to share, lesson 3, is just basically how you collaborate, how you communicate, how you offer up your expertise, your knowledge, your data. So if you play that out, if an organization isn't clear on how it should be sharing data, intellect, et cetera, between, let's say, not just one member to another, but one business unit to another business unit, you're not speaking the same language. And that's often what occurs when you have these silo breakdowns, or the menacing spite that takes over inside of an organization. So to be clearer, I would develop as an organization behaviors, leadership behaviors. I'd weave them into a leadership philosophy or model, call it what you will. And then I would take the time to run that across the organization for however long it takes, and then to tweak as necessary past that point.
Love it. What do you do when you find someone that says, "That's not me, Dan"? I mean, you coming in here with all this caring, fancy words and high feeling stuff. That's not me. I'm a numbers guy. I don't do that stuff. What do you do with those people?
I love that, only because I've been in the room with the CFOs of this world whom exactly said that, and I just find it humorous. Sorry. Um, well, partially, one way in which to get to quote the numbers people, male or female, is to show them examples. I mean, these folks love data. And when you show them examples of organizations that, let's say, were, I don't know, middle of the road, mediocre in their revenues or EBITDA, some of the financial metrics, let's say, that, or the shareholder return, even like dividends and buybacks. Let's say you kind of case study this to them and say, this is where they were. And then this is what happened when they developed an open leadership model. This is what happened when they developed a purpose and started working towards that. And more often than not, the case studies that I deliver to these CFOs or the financial types shows, the Unilever example. Unilever, by example, prior to Pullman's return, or Paul Pullman's ascension into the CEO role, their employee engagement was 53%. Their customer sat issues were everywhere, from Greenpeace to supply chain mismanagement and what have you. And so he set about, right, us building out both an open collaborative culture, that purpose we talked about, serving all stakeholders, not just shareholders, and every metric imaginable over his 10-year reign as CEO went through the roof, that were financial metrics, from, as I say, EPS to EBITDA to shareholder return and so forth. It's kind of an amazing 10-year example. Now, I go back to your question, and I'll take that. I'll take Microsoft, where Satya Nadella's counterintuitive example of how he's leading with heart and empathy over his last 5 years, taking over from Ballmer. And you look at the stock price, first of all, of Ballmer versus Satya, and then you look at customer sat, and then you look at the number of hirings, and then you look at the employee engagement scores of Microsoft circa 5 years ago to today. It's just unimaginably good.
Right.
So data people like data, give them the case studies of those that have changed their ways and show how good they've got it now.
So if we flip it, is it just basically almost the same response? If we have someone that's a chief people officer and is all drinking your Kool-Aid, Dan, it's just like, it's everything. It's all about care and love and all of those things. And we really shouldn't worry about business. This is just a bunch of people getting along in a brick building. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, well, and again, there we are on two sides of the pendulum, and
Yep.
you've got the finance folks that are they're comeuppance, if you will, towards a more caring type of leadership style is unworthy, and then you've got the folks way over on the other side who are, I guess, they're addicted to hugging.
Yeah.
and
Great way
and
to say it.
and that's about it. And that's unfair as well, meaning you can't just hug. You have to have a balance. And whether it's the behaviors that I outline in the Lead Care Win book, or wherever, you cannot have a scenario in which it's too much on the kind of far left or far right, whichever. It's not a political point, right? It's
Sure. Right.
how far are you on not caring and how far are you on caring? You've got to come into the middle. There's still a business to run. We still have strategic imperatives. We still have strat planning. We still need to make cash. So it's this bewilderment, I suppose, that the kind of the pro people, HRE types think that it's got to be all hugs and no action, whereas the all data folks talk maybe a good game, but then don't actually employ any of the caring bits. So we need to come to the middle on both sides.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and it's so interesting. I think that's the ultimate struggle. Is there is a sweet spot. There is this beautiful point of a high performing organization that just knows. Well, to your example, right? The Unilever examples and Microsoft. I mean, and they've started to find these sweet spots that are truly there. It just seems like so many people believe it's counterintuitive to do these things, no matter which side you're on, left, right, of this pendulum. It's
Mhm.
just it's interesting, and it's frustrating sometimes too, as an observer of seeing some dysfunctional organizations, to see that a lot of this doesn't cost money, Dan. A lot of this, it doesn't cost a lot of money to do, does it?
Well, last time I checked, common sense was free.
Last time I checked it, although it's a rare commodity, it is still free. Yes,
Yeah.
that's very true. So, where when you get interviews with folks like me, do many of them start to gravitate and say, well, this is just servant leader stuff, or you're just a steward leadership, or any of those things? Do they try to buy? What are your thoughts on that? What is the difference? Do you believe there's a difference between, kind of the classic servant leader and the things you try to describe with how you're leading with care to win?
Yeah, I just believe that a world without titles and labels is a far better place.
Mm,
So it's not called lead care win leadership. It's not called open to think thinking, right? It's not called flat army culture. These are just book titles, and it's a philosophy. And a philosophy is meant to change. It's meant to morph. It's meant to kind of, you pick a piece of this and that, and you create your own. So, I mean,
yeah, I love
I
that.
get I get the fact that some people might correlate care to servant, and I guess that's fine. And I mean, I'm humbled perhaps that some folks might think that, but I'm more interested, to be quite frank and I guess almost pedantic, is it's up to you as a leader to both define your leadership philosophy of self, and then if you're a leader in HR, if you're a leader in the C-suite, if you're a leader in CIO's office, wherever you are, you also have a responsibility to involve people to define and then enact that leadership model or philosophy for that team or organization. And you should be taking bits of everything that you've learned along your path to the waterfall to create what makes sense for your team. So to follow word for word a playbook of someone's book, mine or otherwise, I think is a falsehood. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm just trying to shine a light on certain behaviors that you might want to consider.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think that gives people empowerment in itself. There's because there are so many people that are just, please, give me the answers. They're seeking the easy button and all that stuff. And the more that you say that this is just, a guidebook, that there are very wide left and right lanes here that you get to fill in all those kind of gray areas, I think is empowering to people. Because I think some people also almost feel ashamed if they read these type of books and then say, well, this is exactly my style, I'm going to do it now. Whereas they should just say, I read Dan's book, he inspired me to do X. And it could be a little bit off of even what you say, but that inspiration is really hopefully what everybody garners out of reading books like yours.
Oh, thanks. I mean, that's very kind. If we're like, you could, for me, if I'm thinking about the act of collaborating or sharing, right? I mean, I'm thinking about Machiavelli's The Prince,
Hmm.
because don't judge a book by its cover. There's wonderful pieces within Wotton's and Machiavelli's book there that will actually make sense to you in your collaboration strategy. But so too, Adam Grant's Give and Take, a wonderful, 7 years ago book that kind of gets the whole world thinking about this relationship between how you give and how you take. Or Clay Shirky's Here Comes Everybody. you
Hmm.
know there's another wonderful book that does wonder for you thinking about how you might share or collaborate. A Kahani's collaborating with the enemy, a different take, right, on how your team might or your organization might, ultimately collaborate. So again, we're all paying homage, I would hope, as thinkers, as leadership strategists, as authors, uh, from the giants before us. So to take one book or one model and then apply it to your organization, I think is foolish. Involve your team, involve everyone, and from there, I think you make it what's for you and your org.
That makes so much sense. I'm going to ask you another one, Dan, another three. And
Hmm.
these are important. I've used these in my past. It was one of the things that attracted me to some of the things that you talk about, topics and all of that, and just what your initial reactions are to this: head, heart, hands.
I'm smiling, grinning ear to ear. Um, I think that I was playing around with the book title for a bit there, and at one point I had it as lead empathy win, but it didn't quite it doesn't roll off the tongue. But that's exactly what you're getting at. Head, heart, hands is the three types of empathy. When you put it all together, it's your kind of caring strategy. Head is, of course, cognitive empathy, how you intellectualize on behalf of what someone else is thinking. Um, when you're talking about sometimes known as emotional empathy, that's putting your heart in the other person's heart. So, what are they feeling in a certain situation? And then, of course, the hands is what psychologists call sympathetic empathy. And that's okay, you've seen or heard or thought or felt enough to take action and to do something about it, hence the hands metaphor. So, empathy, I think, is in dire need these days in organizations.
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you, Dan, it's so funny. I actually could talk to you for 8 hours. I feel like I just looked up and we've already been talking for over a half an hour and I didn't even realize it
Oh,
because this is just such a great topic to talk about. Now, again, we geek out on these kind of things, but I think they're just so important, not only for organizations, but you could argue that this is a great place to run friendships, a great way to think about how you participate in your own household. All of those kind of things, they're all universal, but they certainly would work in the business world if there's just the act of doing. So let me talk to you about that one, I guess, real quick. I've just stumbled into thinking about that. What are your thoughts on, like the word action or doing or any of that stuff when you're addressing leaders, when you're talking to somebody about these ideas that you possess? What is kind of uh, your viewpoint on the actual execution of these kind of things?
well, I'll answer it in a tangential way. So before I wrote Flat Army, I had sketched out a parenting book in the year 2011. And the reason I had sketched out a parenting book was because Denise and I were in the throes of raising, and still are, what we call three goats: Claire, Cole, and Kate. They're not actually goats; they're actually children,
Nice.
but we call them goats. Before it was an acronym for greatest of all time. It was actually a
That's right.
kidding synonymous, Billy Goats Kids, right? So anyway, so the title of that book, however, was "Listen, Think, Do."
Oh, wow.
And the reason being was that that's what we used to tell our kids when they're really young. Okay, Cole, listen, think about it, now do. Now, the book is still in sketch, and I might come back to it one day. But the point is this: it's the same kind of adage that we should be employing as leaders of our home, our relationships with our spouse, our kids, our neighbors, our parents, and our organization. If we listen, that's an act of empathy. Listen is an anagram for silent. Be silent, listen, and sort of uncover, discover, relate. When you think, now you're kind of processing, right? And you're saying, okay, that maybe this, maybe that, maybe someone else needs to be involved in the decision. Okay, so whatever, you're thinking about it. But to your point, you've got to take action. You have to do. And so I kind of close one of the lessons in the book, the last lesson of the book, which is called Champion Others, with that exact point. When it's kind of back to manners. And so the kind of the subtext here is each of the 9 lessons have, action points. Here's are things for you to consider and take action with. And the actual action is titled as follows: hold the door, let someone in, and say Gesundheit. And what it's basically saying is you have to sort of stop and listen and say, hey, is someone coming? So, because, maybe your back is turned, but you're listening. You're like, oh, is someone coming? And then you're thinking about it. Maybe I should hold the door for that person. Oh, they're just about to sneeze. Okay, I'm going to hold the door. They're going to sneeze, and I'm going to say bless you or Gesundheit. So I've now thought about it. I've stopped, right? I'm thinking, okay, yeah. And I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to hold the door. I'm going to say bless you or Gesundheit because they just sneezed as they're walking through the door. That sounds like civility 101, Jim.
It does. It is manners. You are correct.
But that's kind of the point. We can't just think about leadership behavior. We can't just ponder, and we can't just listen all day. We have to take action. Otherwise, we suffer from what Dr. Igor Ansoff referred to as paralysis by analysis.
That's exactly right.
We have to not sense it.
Which is a pandemic in itself out there in the business world.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Dan, I can't thank you enough for teasing us with the time that you've had to share these thoughts. They're impactful. They truly are. And again, I think this is an 8-hour episode, but I have to be mindful of everybody that's listening and of your time. So I can't thank you enough for really showcasing, that 3-legged stool of culture, purpose, and thinking time, which gives us this new seat, this new solid foundation of lead, care, and win. This fantastic topics. It's an amazing book. I'm telling you, all the books are worth reading for sure. And I'd love for you to take us out of this episode with last thoughts, if you don't mind.
I think everyone needs to remember that you're going to have your own style, your own mojo, and be true to yourself. But I will challenge you with something that helped me 13 years ago now. And I didn't call it this at the time, but I challenged myself in defining who I was and kind of how I want to be known when I leave a room or enter a room or answer an email or have a discussion like you with you, James. And that is your declaration. What's your declaration of meaning or declaration of purpose or declaration of self? What's the 1 line, maybe 2 line? What's that pithy statement that you can put on your email signature, that you can share with friends and your boss or your new employer when you're about to be hired? What gives you your North Star, your gravitas? If you kind of think about what we've been chatting about today, that notion of who are you? What's your behavior? How do you want to be known? How do you take action? But crystallize it, not in a mission statement, but in something that, again, you'll be known for. So I'll share mine, and then I challenge Jim. I'm assuming you've got one, but I challenge the audience here to go write it down, to memorize it, and to employ it in all your actions, whether you're at home, in the neighborhood, in the community, or obviously at work. So here's mine. We're not here to see through each other. We're here to see each other through.
I love it. I love it, Dan. It's that's powerful. It makes me think of the African greeting of Sono Bono, as in I see you, and that meaning of what it is behind that. And we are going to see each other through. For me, iron sharpens iron, and Dan, you have made us better today. Thanks again for your time.
My pleasure, Jim. And keep doing what you're doing. The world needs more Jims.
Thanks for joining our leadership movement this week, talking to Dan about how to act not out of ego, but out of purpose, and so many other leadership lessons that will take you and your organization to the next level. Was just flat out fun today. Don't forget that our show notes are posted on the website with key leader takeaways, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend so we can continue to build the tribe. Until next time, remember that iron sharpens iron. Make yourself and others around you better every single day.